Okay, so for our next activity, I want to go back to exercise B from the worksheet. Now, as you can see, I removed all of the sentences that we made with the other adverb clause. These are the original answers, and I briefly mentioned this earlier, but each sentence has an adverb clause, of course, and also a main clause. This is true of any sentence that has an adverb clause. So, for example, number 1, while Bill was eating dinner, he heard a noise in the garden. So, I mentioned earlier that while Bill was eating dinner is the adverb clause. It starts with while. And the main clause is he heard a noise in the garden. So actually, let me highlight that. Okay, and then even for this one too, for number 2, while Bohe and Sophia were waiting for a bus, they phoned their friends. So this is the main clause, and the adverb clause starts with while. Okay, and number 3, when Liana and I heard the fire alarm, we were taking a test. And so this is the adverb clause, which starts with when, and then we were taking a test is the main clause. Oh, I forgot to do it for the other sentences, but I'll come back and do that. Okay, and then number 4, Teresa was eating a sandwich when she broke her tooth. So when she broke her tooth, that's the adverb clause, and Teresa was eating a sandwich is the main clause. And then when Mr. and Mrs. Ramirez came home, they were carrying a lot of bags. So they were carrying a lot of bags is the main clause, and here is the adverb clause beginning with when. And then Joe and Omar saw a deer while they were jogging in the park. So this is the main clause. Joe and Omar saw a deer. And then the adverb clause is while they were jogging in the park. And for the other sentences, it's the same thing actually. So Bill heard a noise in the garden. That's the main clause. In this one, it says he, but it's the same as I mentioned. Just use the name in the beginning part of the sentence and the pronoun he in the second part of the sentence. Okay? And then same here, Bohe and Sophia phoned their friends. Oh, oops, it's highlighting the whole thing. Let's do it separately. Phoned their friends, okay? And then we were taking a test. So Liana and I were taking a test. And then she was eating a sandwich. And then Mr. and Mrs. Ramirez were carrying a lot of bags. And then finally, they saw a deer. Okay, so I want you to make questions with the main clause as the answers. Okay, so all the highlights are a little confusing actually. So you know what? I'm going to remove the highlights that I just made for the second sentences. Let me see. Where's the... Okay. Okay, so now you can see a much simpler, clearer view. So, okay. Now, as I mentioned, I want you to make I want you to make questions with the main clause as the answers. So, for example, let's look at exercise C. I'm going to use number 3 as the example, but the question says, what were you doing when your teacher started English class today? So, I might say, now of course we're not really in English class and we can't be there, so I'm just going to make an answer. I was talking with a classmate when my teacher started English class today. Okay, so what is the main clause in this sentence? What is the main clause? Okay, and I hope you were able to identify this part as the main clause. I was talking with a classmate. Okay, that's the main clause. And when my teacher started English class today is the adverb clause. And when you look at the question, this part, what were you doing, focuses on the past continuous part of the sentence. So I was talking with a classmate. And it's also possible to make a question with the adverb clause. So for example, we might say, what happened while you were talking with a classmate? Okay, so if you remember from our activities and exercises on page 115, we asked this question, what happened? It was just very simple, what happened? But if you include the while clause, the past continuous part, then we need to say, what happened while you were talking with a classmate? And the short answer is, my teacher started English class. Now, of course, this is not a unique event. Like if you say, my teacher started English class while I was talking with a classmate, it's not really that strange or unique. So this example is maybe a little silly. What happened while you were talking with a classmate? Because normally we use what happened when it's something unique, like the lights went out, or as you can see in number 4 here, she broke her tooth, or Joe and Omar saw a deer. But you know, the teacher starting English class is nothing special. But anyway, you get the point. So I'm just trying to demonstrate how to use or how to make questions with the past tense and with also the past continuous tense. So anyway, the reason why I brought this up was so that you can see how to make a question with the main clause as the answer. So if you go back up to number 1, while Bill was eating dinner, he heard a noise in the garden. So he heard a noise in the garden. Is this past tense or past continuous tense? Yeah, it's past tense. You can see here, he heard a noise. So we have to make a question using the past tense. So in this case, we are going to say, what happened? And then complete the question with the while clause, the adverb clause. So what happened while Bill was eating dinner? Okay, and then the main clause is the answer, the short answer. So he heard a noise in the garden. Okay, so I want you to do that for numbers 2 through 6, and then you can so pause the video and you can continue when you're finished. Okay, so you know what? Let me change the question color to something else. Let's do blue. Okay, now it's easier to differentiate. Okay, so number 2, the answer is they phoned their friends. So we can ask, what happened? You know, even for this one, it might just be better to say, what did Bohe and Sophia do? So you can also do this if it's not something sudden that happened, because if you look at this answer, they phoned their friends. It's not anything unexpected. They did it intentionally. So it's better to say, what did Bohe and Sophia do, instead of what happened. Because when we say what happened, it's usually something out of their control. So this one is in their control. They did it intentionally. So we can say, what did Bohe and Sophia do while they were waiting for a bus? Okay. And then let's look at number 3. When Liana and I heard the fire alarm, we were taking a test. So this one is a past continuous question. Okay. So we need to say, what words were Liana and I, or actually, I'm sorry, and you doing when you, and this time you is you plural, Liana and you. Okay. So this first you is just the opposite of I, and then this you is Liana and you. What were Liana and you doing? Actually, I'm sorry for all the changes. It's very, very early in the morning. What were you and Liana? Okay. But when you answer, you should always put the other person first. So you should say Liana and I. But when you ask the question, you start with the person you are talking to. So you and Liana. What were you and Liana doing when you heard the fire alarm? Okay. And the short answer is we were taking a test. Okay. And then number 4, Teresa was eating a sandwich. So we can ask what. Okay. And then this is past continuous. So what was Teresa doing? And then let's include the adverb clause, when she broke her tooth. Okay. Let's look at number 5. They were carrying a lot of bags. So we can say, oops, what? And then same thing. This is past continuous, except it's third person plural. So we should say, what were Mr. and Mrs. Ramirez doing when they came home? Okay. And then also in this case, what were they doing is a little strange because this is not really an activity, but it's just a condition. Well, not really a condition, but a situation of carrying a lot of bags. So it might just be better to say, what were Mr. and Mrs. Ramirez carrying? That just makes more sense and sounds more natural. Okay, and then number 6, Joe and Omar saw a deer. So we can say, so this one is past tense. So we can say, what happened, or what did Joe and Omar see? But anyway, let's just stick with what happened. While Joe and Omar were jogging in the park. Okay, so I know this was a little complicated, but it will get easier as we practice more. But for now, we are going to go ahead and look at Lesson D, reading, in our student's book. So go back to your student's book, and this is page 116, I believe. Yeah, 116. Okay, so you'll see a picture here, and I want you to take some time to answer these questions. Doesn't have to be complicated, just simple. So after you answer the questions, you can continue. So pause the video and continue when you're finished. Okay, so for number 1, who are the people in the picture? You might say, they are a family. And for number 2, what do you think is happening? You could say, their house is on fire, or a fire is coming near their house. Okay? And then number 3, how do they probably feel? So we can say, they probably feel worried, or scared, or sad. Okay? So now let's take a look at the newspaper article. Okay, the title is Home is More Than a Building. All right, so I'm going to play the audio.
Page 116, Exercise 2.
Home is more than a building. A few months ago, Pedro Ramirez, 45, lost his job in a grocery store. To pay the bills, he got a part-time job at night. Several days later, Pedro's wife, Luisa, gave him a big surprise. She was pregnant with their 3rd child. Pedro was happy, but worried. How am I going to support another child without a full-time job? He wondered. That evening, Pedro and Luisa got some more news. A fire was coming near their home. By the next morning, the fire was very close. The police ordered every family in the neighborhood to evacuate. The Ramirez family moved quickly. While Pedro was gathering their legal documents, Luisa grabbed the family photographs, and the children put their pets, a cat and a bird, in the family's van. Then the family drove to the home of Luisa's sister, 1 hour away. About 24 hours later, Pedro and Luisa got very bad news. The fire destroyed their home. They lost almost everything. With no home, only part-time work, and a baby coming, Pedro was even more worried about the future. For the next 11 months, the Ramirez family stayed with Luisa's sister while workers were rebuilding their home. Many generous people helped them during that difficult time. Friends took them shopping for clothes. Strangers left gifts at their door. A group of children collected $500 to buy bicycles for the Ramirez children. Because of all the help from friends and neighbors, the Ramirez family was able to rebuild their lives. 2 months after the fire, Luisa mailed out holiday cards with this message: "Home is more than a building. Home is wherever there is love."
Okay, so now let's look at the next page. So I want you to go ahead and do exercises 3A and 3B. And for exercise A, I want you to make complete sentences if possible. So you should make complete sentences for all of them except for maybe number 3, because it says name 3 things. So when you name 3 things, you just need to list them. You don't have to make a sentence. And go ahead and also do exercise B. And then so you can pause the video and continue when you're finished. Okay, so now let's look at exercise 3A, number 1. What is the main idea of this news article? Underline the details that support your answer. So we might say, home is more than a building, just like the title. Or we can include, home is more than a building. Home is wherever there is love. Okay, and you can underline many words and phrases in these last 2 paragraphs because we know that they feel this way because of all the love and help they received. So you can underline those details. And then number 2, why did Pedro and Maria move to her sister's home? So we can say they moved to her sister's home because the fire destroyed their home. So you can actually see that here in this paragraph. The fire destroyed their home. Since this is an independent clause, we can use because. It has a subject and a verb. So because the fire destroyed their home. But if you remember when we were learning because and because of, you can also use because of and just use a noun phrase. You can say because of the fire. So Pedro and Maria moved to her sister's home because of the fire. Or they moved because the fire destroyed their home. Okay. And then number 3, name 3 things that changed Pedro and Maria's life. So we can just list these things. Pedro lost his job. Luisa got pregnant, and a fire destroyed their home. So you can make sentences like that, or you can make noun phrases like loss of Pedro's job, Luisa's pregnancy, and the fire. So those are noun phrases, but you can do it like that too. And then number 4, who were the people that helped Pedro and Maria rebuild their lives? Okay, so if you look here in these two paragraphs, you can say friends and neighbors, so right here, friends and neighbors, and even strangers helped Pedro and Maria rebuild their lives. So you can say friends, neighbors, and strangers helped Pedro and Maria rebuild their lives. Okay, and then number 5, in the second paragraph, what does the word evacuate mean? So you can see this word here, and evacuate means to leave a dangerous place. And in fact, you can see that here in number 2 of exercise B. Okay, and then number 6, how were Maria and Pedro able to overcome this difficult time? So you can say they were able to overcome this difficult time because many generous people helped them. So that is here in this sentence, in this paragraph. They were able to overcome this difficult time because many generous people helped them. Okay, and in exercise B, I'm sure you were able to find all these words, so I'm just going to go over them quickly because we're already at, over the 20-minute mark. So support means to pay for necessary things. Okay, evacuate means to leave a dangerous place. Gathering means gathering means collecting. Number 4, grabbed means took quickly. 5, destroyed means broke completely. 6, generous means giving, and in this case, giving is not a verb, it's an adjective, like someone with a giving heart. It doesn't mean like, I am giving some money to my parents. So in this case, the ing is not a continuous verb, it is an adjective. Okay, and then number 7, strangers are people you don't know. And then 8, message is communication. Okay, we're not going to do exercise C together, but if you have time, you can do this with people in your family. But I will see you for our next lesson. Okay, goodbye.